All right, welcome back to Metro Morning Live. It's now 15 minutes past the hour. Each and every Tuesday, we talk you and your money. We'd like to welcome back to the show Jim Griffith of Griffith Financial. Good morning, Jim. You've been sailing the seven seas, I see.
No, Rob, I've been working. I wish I was.
Well, Jim, you doing okay this morning?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Rob.
Well, this morning we're going to talk about the principles of preserving wealth, what everybody needs to know. So I guess what are the principles of preserving wealth there, Jim?
Well, the principles of preserving wealth is you want to manage your personal as well as your financial assets in the proper way while you're alive. Mm-hmm. And then when you pass away, you want to make sure that those assets are distributed to the people you want to have them distributed to in a tax-efficient manner on your death. Now, this requires some planning. It's very important that you get that planning because you have to plan for things like health care when you get older. That's one of the major things that cause people to lose a lot of assets that go back to the state for reimbursement for Medicaid. And you want to make sure that these assets go to the heirs that you want to have them go to. You want to also eliminate as much as you can, have the plan in place so that you don't have any wrangling with family members, running up unnecessary legal expenses. And you want to make sure that you provide for those people that may be special needs individuals in the family that need protection.
Absolutely. Now, Jim, when you talk about preserving wealth, how should people approach that?
Yeah, first thing you want to keep in mind that this is too important to leave up to luck. So you want to get right on top of this as soon as you can. And the approach that you should use is you should be extremely aggressive. You should be like the road runner with 2 Acme rockets strapped on your side, moving to get out in front of this thing because it's just that important. The other thing you want to do is make sure that once you get that plan in place, every year you have that annual review so you can make sure that you're taking advantage of any changes in the law that may benefit your plan, or there could be some changes that may negatively affect your plan, and you want to correct those situations.
When you look at estate management principles, what are the keys for that?
Well, basically, there are 3 critical components. One, and the most important, is to understand how the estate tax works. The other would be make sure you have all of your critical documents in place in your plan. And the other is to understand the specific strategies and tactics in estate planning so that you can minimize taxation and maximize distribution of those assets to your heirs.
Well, Jim, how did estate taxes begin?
Well, believe it or not, back in, I believe it was 1797, the first estate tax was levied to finance an undeclared war between the United States and France. That estate tax later was repealed after the war. Then it was instituted again during the Civil and Spanish-American War, again to help finance the war. Then it came back and repealed it after the war. Then in 1913, the 16th Amendment to the Constitution was passed, and that allowed Congress to levy taxes against all sources of income. So that basically developed into the Revenue Act of 1916, I believe, and that essentially created the estate tax. Since then, it's been modified a number of times, as you know, but it has stuck with us since then.
Well, how do you estimate your estate taxes?
Yeah, a simple way to look at this is you take your total assets, and then you look at the exemptions that you have. You subtract those exemptions, and then you're going to have a dollar amount left over. If you're eligible and you fall into that category where you actually have to pay estate taxes. Then you take your tax rate times that number that's left over, and that's going to tell you how much you have to pay in estate taxes.
All right. And now, what are the critical estate management documents?
Yeah, the critical documents there that you want to keep. Number one, you want to have a will is normally the cornerstone of most estates because most people don't have huge estates. The will, again, as we mentioned before, is kind of problematic because it can be contested. The other thing is that it has to go through probate, and when it goes to probate, everything becomes a matter of public record. That's why we recommend to everyone to use a trust instead of the will, because the trust allows you to avoid probate, keep the legal expenses down to a minimum, and to also keep all your affairs private. The other thing you want to have is your living will or advance directives. And that's basically letting the doctors know it's a legal document you have on file, and it lets the doctors know what type of health care you want to have.
All right.
You want to definitely have that power of attorney, and you also want for legal and financial affairs, and you want to have a durable power of attorney for health care, have someone to make health care decisions for you.
All right, and what else is needed in an effective estate plan?
The other thing that's needed, especially if you have a really large estate, and it's also recommended if you just have a regular estate, and that's life insurance. And the reason for that is because if you have a huge estate, the estate tax kicks in right now at $5.49 million. Any amount of money above that potentially can be taxed at a rate of 40%. So what we do is, let's use one of the strategies I talked about. We'll set up a life insurance trust. It's called an ILAC, Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust. Inside that trust, what we'll do is we'll purchase a life insurance policy and design it so that trust itself, it has a separate tax ID number, and it's completely separated from your estate. So when I die, that life insurance proceeds will pay down into the trust, and then based upon the amount of taxes that I have to pay as far as estate taxes, the money will come from the trust, pay the estate taxes. Now my beneficiaries or heirs will be able to inherit 100% of my estate, and then if there's any money left over, that money can then be distributed to them as well.
Wow.
And the best year, if you really want to look at this, and for a person who had a huge estate, would have been 2010 if you wanted to die. And because in 2010, there was a 1-year gap where there was no estate tax at all. And let's take a look at this quick video, and I'll show you what I mean.
Okay.
For the very wealthy, 2010 was a good year to make an exit. The estate tax law expired briefly for the first time in nearly 100 years. The 1-year hiatus cost the U.S. Treasury billions in estate tax revenue and may turn out to be a home run for one famous figure in baseball. Yankee owner George Steinbrenner passed away in July 2010, potentially saving his heirs hundreds of millions of dollars on the estate, valued at $1.1 billion. Had he died in 2009, his heirs may have faced a maximum estate tax rate of 45% on assets over $3.5 million, or as much as $500 million. Had he lived until 2015, the maximum estate tax rate would have been 40% on assets over $5.43 million. But since he passed away in 2010, Steinbrenner's heirs may decide to pay no estate taxes at all. Estate tax laws have regularly been repealed then reinstated since the first law was passed in 1797. The most recent version of the law was passed in 1916, and in some form or another, that estate tax has been with us ever since. Recent changes could affect the estate strategy you have in place, so don't strike out when it comes to passing your wealth along to your loved ones. Call today for more information on tax law changes.
Wow, George Steinbrenner. Well, you know,
Well, he hit a home run.
hit a home run.
Hit a home run.
In 210. Well, Jim, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back with more information on this. Great information. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us.
You're watching JSU TV.